Jinn. We are on the verse number 11th of Surah Al-Jinn, chapter number 72, verse 11. We just began this verse yesterday. Inshallah, we'll discuss more in detail today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the Jinn speaking, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And the Jinn said, وَأَنَّا مِنَّا الصَّالِحُونَ وَمِنَّا دُونَ ذَلِكَ كُنَّا طَرَائِقَ قِدَدًا. And that some of us are already righteous, salihun, and from amongst us are those who are not righteous, who are not from the salihin. Kunna tara'iqa qidada, we are on different paths and different ways, different religions. Tara'iq is plural of tariqatun, and over here it means religion, right? Adyan. And qidadan is plural of qidad. It means qiddatun, and it also means different religions. So two words, they mean the same thing, different groups, different religions, to emphasize. The two words meaning the same thing, same meaning, so it's there to emphasize a certain meaning. So they are basically saying we are divided into many religions, many groups. So the Jinnat, they also have different adyan, different religions. Ad-Dhahhak rahimahullah, he said that adyan and mukhtalifa, yani they have different religions. أي لم يكن كل الجن كفارا بل كانوا مختلفين منهم كفار ومنهم مؤمنون صلحاء ومنهم مؤمنون غير صلحاء. So basically, amongst the jinn, there are those who are disbelievers, and then there are those who are believers, but they are practicing believers, and then there are those believers amongst the jinn who are non-practicing, right? They commit sins. While they believe, they commit sins. So just like any group within the human beings. So from this, scholars understood that between the jinn kind, they have different religions. So there are Christian jinns, there are Jewish jinns, there are Hindu jinns, and then among the Muslims jinn, there are different sects as well, and school of thoughts as well, like Sunni jinns and the Shias jinns and the Khawarij and Rawafid and so on and so forth, right? So Allama ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he mentions an incident with his chain of transmission, right? That leads to Al-A'mash rahimahullah. Basically, this incident was recorded by Ahmad ibn Sulaiman al-Najad fi amalihi. Yani he had a book of narrations that he received from his teachers, and Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he found it in his book. Ahmad ibn Sulaiman, before I go, this incident is about Imam al-A'mash, Imam Sulaiman ibn Mahran al-A'mash. Right? And this used to be a very great scholar in Kufa, and he passed away in the year 147 Hijri, 147 after the migration of the Prophet ﷺ from Makkah to Medina, and he was a great tabi'i. A little bit about Al-A'mash before we go into the incident, so that we understand who is A'mash, who is interacting with this jinn, right? When we understand the man, then we understand the significance of the incident as well. Otherwise, Al-A'mash is just a random guy in history. We don't understand the value behind this incident in that case, if you don't know who Al-A'mash is. Imam Al-A'mash, rahimahullah, he was born in Tabaristan. This area is in the south of Caspian Sea in the modern day of Iran. He was born right after the tragedy of Karbala, right? So very early on in the Islamic history. And he was born right after the incident of Karbala in the same year, or some mentions a year after the tragedy of Karbala. After he was born, his parents moved with him from Tabaristan to Kufa. Now remember, Kufa at that time was a very major metropolitan city. A lot of scholars were there. It was a city of learning. It was a city of scholarship and learning. Why? Because it was a former capital of the Khilafah of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So this city, Kufa, consisted of many companions and many major students of the companions, Ridwanullahi ajma'in. So he grew up in Kufa and basically lived his entire life and died in Kufa. He was able to see Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he also saw the companion Abdullah ibn Abi Awfa radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Abdullah ibn Abi Awfa was the last companion to pass away in Kufa. So you can see, like, he's very young, and he's seeing these senior scholars, senior companions of the Prophet ﷺ passing away. By the time he reached the age of learning, so he learned from some of the greatest tabi'un, tabi'un, successors of the companions, students of the companions like Amir al-Sha'bi, and the great followers, tabu tabi'un, like Ibrahim al-Nakhai. So he has very major people teaching him. Amongst his students are the imams of fiqh, like Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah is a student of Imam al-Sha'bi. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Sufyan al-Thawr, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, these are giants in Kufa, major scholars of Kufa, and they are all students of Al-A'mash. So we can understand how great of a scholar Al-A'mash rahimahullah used to be, and he's a contemporary of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, who was from the Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet's family, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Now, the incident is that Al-A'mash mentions that tarawwaha ilayna jinniyun, that one day a jinn basically came to chill with us, right? Tarawwaha, he came to chill with us, he visited us. فَقُلْتُ لَهُ, and I said to him, مَا أَحَبُّ الطَّعَامِ إِلَيْكُمْ, what is your favorite food? Right? Al-A'mash is asking, rahimahullah, this jinn, what is your favorite food? So the jinn responded, فَقَالَ الْأُرْزَ, the rice. My favorite food is the rice. How many people ate rice today? So the jinn's favorite food was rice. فَقَالَ فَأَتَيْنَاهُمْ بِهِ, Imam Al-A'mash, he said, rahimahullah, that we brought rice for him. We brought rice for him. فَجَعَلْتُ أَرَى اللُّقَمَ تُرْفَعُ وَلَا أَرَى أَحَدًا. Then Al-A'mash said, I actually saw the morsel rise up from the plate, rise up, and I did not see anybody there. Because we can't see jinn, right? He's able to communicate, but he can't see the jinn. So he see the morsel lifting up from the plate and then basically disappearing because the jinn ate it, and he did not see any jinn or any physical thing in front of him eating it. فَقُلْتُ, then I said, فِيكُم مِّنْ هَذِهِ الْأَهْوَاءِ الَّتِي فِينَا. Then Imam Al-A'mash, after feeding the jinn, asked a very pressing question. Maybe this was a question that Imam Al-A'mash was thinking. So he asked him, do you guys have the same kind of groupings and different groups, different religions that we have in human race? So the jinn said, yes. قَالَ نَعَمْ قُلْتُ, then I said, Imam Al-A'mash said, I said, فَمَا الرَّافِضَةُ فِيكُمْ. So who are the Rawafids from amongst you? Rafida was a sect in early Islamic history, especially in the city of Kufa at that time. They were from the extreme Shi'as. They actually used to curse the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and they used to especially curse the Khulafa Rashidun, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So Kufa was basically like a hot center of these people, extreme folks. So Al-A'mash, of course, is now wondering, do jinns have these kind of people as well? Or ideas within themselves. So he said, Sharruna, yani the shayateen amongst us, they follow these kind of things as well. And then Imam Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he said that I presented this chain of narration of this incident to my teacher Al-Mizzi, who was a great muhaddith, and Al-Mizzi said that this is a correct and authentic narration that leads up to Al-A'mash. So we learn from this that the jinn kind also have different kinds of religions and different kinds of sects, just like human beings, we have it, different religion and different sects. Then there is another incident that the Muhaddithun mentions. There is a jinn who was very poetic. There's a poetic jinn, right? Al-Hafiz ibn Asakir rahimahullah, he wrote in the biography of Al-Abbas ibn Ahmad al-Dimashqi that he said, I heard a few jinn singing inside my house in the middle of the night while I was in my house. And he actually remembers the poetic verses that the jinn were singing, قُلُوبٌ بَرَاهَا الْحُبُّ حَتَّى تَعَلَّقَتْ مَذَاهِبُهَا فِي كُلِّ غَرْبٍ وَشَارِقِ. Hearts have polished love until its doctrines have established in the east and the west. تَهَيَّمُوا بِحُبِّ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ رَبُّهَا مُعَلَّقَةٌ بِاللَّهِ دُونَ الْخَلَائِقِ. She is crazy. The heart is being referred to as feminine. The heart is crazy. She is crazy about the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah is her Lord, the Lord of the heart. The heart is attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to any of the creatures. This jinn must be somebody who is engrossed in the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. MashaAllah. So these things actually happen, right? We are able to hear, we are able to communicate with the jinn. And if they're good jinn, they do these kind of things, and you may hear stuff like that, but they're not harming anyone. Right? In both of these interactions, there was no harm taking place. Sometimes we think, and we've been talking about this in the beginning of this session and series as well, that the idea that jinn, they are always there to harm human beings, that's not entirely the case. That's not entirely the truth, right? And we established that jinn are of two kinds. There are good jinn, and then there are mischievous jinn who are shayateen. So shayateen are different kind. And then there are jinn who are righteous, right? So these are good jinns who interacted with the believers and the scholars, and there was no harm that took place, right? In the verse number 12, the jinn continues, this first batch of the jinn converts, they continued and they said, وَأَنَّا ظَنَنَّا أَن لَن نُعْجِزَ اللَّهَ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَن نُعْجِزَهُ حَرَبًا. And that we now have believed that we can never frustrate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth, nor can we baffle, surprise Him by our escape. What are they talking about? What escape are they talking about? Huh? Day of Judgment? No. Good try. In the context we've been talking, we're in the 10th series now. 10th session of this Surah Al-Jinn. What's happening? What's the context of the surah? The jinn were listening to the angels. What? No, what happened before that? They couldn't get the information from the heavens, from the angels, right? And then they were getting pelted by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these so-called shooting stars, right? So now they are saying that we have now believed. In this context, if you keep the context in mind, now they are saying we now have believed that there is no way we can frustrate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth, and there is no way we can surprise Him and baffle Him by escaping from what He has decreed upon us. Yani, if Allah has decided that we cannot get that information and He's going to stone us with that, whenever we try, then there's no escaping for us. We will get hit by whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded, right? So from this verse we learn that the jinn, these jinn, they are acknowledging that they are powerless. We learn that jinn are acknowledging that they are powerless in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yani, they are not all powerful. The shirk human beings do when they exaggerate and when they boost the egos of the jinn, the humans do it because they think that jinns are supernatural beings. They have some powers, right? So yes, jinn are able to travel very quickly on earth, and back in the days before the nubuwwah of the Prophet ﷺ, they were able to fetch information from the heavens as well. They had that capability, right? Yet they don't have absolute power. They have limitations as well. They are able to get controlled, and they are able to get punished as well. All of these things, just like human beings can get punished, jinns are also able to get punished. And here they are acknowledging their limitation. They are humbling themselves and they are acknowledging their limitations. This is very important for human beings to understand, that jinn are as limited as we are. Perhaps they are in some avenues stronger than us, yet at the end of the day, they still have limitations, just like human beings have certain limitations. And these jinn, they are admitting to that fact. Another point is that they acknowledge that they cannot run away from the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They cannot run away from the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the last point I want to make over here is Allah mentions that they use the word وَأَنَّا ظَنَنَّا. Does anybody know what zananna means? وَأَنَّا ظَنَنَّا أَن لَن نُعْجِزَ اللَّهَ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَن نُعْجِزَهُ هَرَبًا. Zananna. What does the zananna mean over here? With the ta, zananna. Thought. Zananna, we thought. This is the Arabic dictionary meaning, right? Zananna. وَأَنَّا ظَنَنَّا, if we translate based on the Arabic dictionary meaning, which is the linguistic meaning of zananna, then it would be we thought that we will not be able to frustrate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you say zananna, there is a doubt. It's not conclusive. It's an assumption, right? Good. It's an assumption. There is a doubt. There is a possibility. Maybe that is the case. Maybe that is not the case. Is there any possibility that jinn can overpower Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is there any possibility that jinn are able to frustrate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No, then why are they using the word zananna over here? Zananna poses doubt. Either they can, also it's possible they cannot. You understand what I'm trying to say over here? The word is not conclusive. Why? Is that what we're learning from this? That they don't believe, they have the possibility that they can actually overcome Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? But that's not what the context is. No, they don't think they can. They never thought of that. They never thought that they can outdo Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But over here, they're just admitting that the fact that they are limited by their capabilities. So they're never claiming that they can basically frustrate Allah or overcome Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they're acknowledging their limitation. Why are they using zananna? What is the meaning of zananna over here then? See, this is why sometimes just the bare basic Arabic dictionary meaning will never work in understanding the Quran. You have to look at the Mufassirun, what the Mufassirun have explained. The same surah, in Surah Al-Jinn, in verse number 5, the same jinn, they said, وَأَنَّا زَنَنَّا أَنَّن تَقُولَ الْإِنسَانُ وَالْجِنُّ عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا. The linguistic meaning applies over there. That when we discuss in verse number 5, when we were discussing, and they were saying, we thought, right? Like the brother mentioned, thought. Zananna, we thought. We thought that the people and the jinn will never lie about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They thought. That means that was their assumption. The reality was against it. The reality was the jinn, Iblis, and the human beings, they did actually lie about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their thought was wrong. So zananna in verse number 5 is according to the linguistic meaning, the dictionary meaning. You open the Hansware Arabic to English dictionary, this is what the meaning you will find over there. But in verse number 12, zananna does not mean that. The linguistic meaning, the dictionary meaning cannot be applied over here. If you translate by the linguistic meaning, the translation will be incorrect. The meaning of the verse will be incorrect, right? So where do we get the meaning if not from the dictionary? Therefore, you need to learn from the how the early companions of the Prophet ﷺ and the early scholars, they understood. The Mufassirun, then they explained. So in the Mufassirun, they explained that over here, zananna means different from the linguistic meaning, from the dictionary meaning. Here, zananna means conclusive. It's not we thought, we know. We know. So zananna can also be used in the meaning of conclusive understanding, right? So here, وَأَنَّا ظَنَنَّا أَن لَن نُعْجِزَ اللَّهَ, we have now believed. We know this for sure that we are never able to frustrate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon earth, and we will definitely not be able to surprise Him or frustrate Him by escaping and running away from Him. There's no place in this universe where we can run away and hide away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His punishment if we keep trying to fetch that information from the first heavens. Does that make sense? The point over here is that sometimes always look a little bit deeper what the scholars have explained in the verses of the Quran. Just the mere Arabic dictionary meaning will not suffice. The verse could mean a little bit more deeper than that. In verse number 13, the next verse, the jinn then continue on, and then remember they are discussing with each other. In verse number 13, they said, وَأَنَّا لَمَّا سَمِعْنَا الْهُدَى آمَنَّا بِهِ. That when we heard the guiding discourse, which is huda over here? What is huda over here? When we heard the guiding discourse, what is that guiding discourse? The Quran. Who was reciting the Quran? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Now they're coming back to that incident while conversing and narrating this to their fellow jinns, that indeed when we heard that guiding discourse, that recitation, that Quran, aman nabi, we believed in it. فَمَنْ يُؤْمِنْ بِرَبِّهِ فَلَا يَخَافُ بَخْسًا وَلَا رَهَقًا. And anyone who believes in their Lord, فَلَا يَخَافُ بَخْسًا وَلَا رَهَقًا, there is no fear of curtailment in their reward. There is no fear of restriction, their reward getting restricted, وَلَا رَهَقًا, and there is no excess punishment for these people. Why? Because when you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all your previous sins are forgiven. When a person takes a shahada, all their previous sins in their previous life, before taking the shahada, all the previous sins are forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they declared it. So, jinn, now they're admitting their humility, they're limited, their powers are limited, they acknowledge all of this, and then they say that we heard this recitation of the Quran and we believed in it. And what's the benefit of believing in Allah's kalam, Allah's speech? That anybody who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no restriction in the reward that they can receive, and then there is no excess punishment for these people, right? So that is true for the human beings, and it is also true for the jinn as well. Now, again, this was not something that the jinn knew. The Prophet ﷺ knew that jinn are listening. So the Prophet ﷺ never gave da'wah to these jinn. They just heard the recitation of the Quran, and iman entered the jinn heart, and they accepted Islam, right? And they affirmed what the Prophet ﷺ was reciting, and they affirmed that this recitation is not a kalam of the Prophet ﷺ, rather is the kalam of Allah, the Creator. And how did they learn this? They learned it because the beauty and the balagha and the rhetoric of the Quran, the beauty of the language of the Quran was clear for them to distinguish this from the kalam of the Prophet ﷺ or any other human being. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. All right. There's one more point, inshallah, to discuss in this verse, and then verse number 13 and verse number 14 we will discuss, inshallah, tomorrow. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. جزاكم الله خير. Brother, can you make the adhan, inshallah?